On board the interspecies diplomatic vessel Unity's Promise, peace was maintained through strict protocols. Different species lived and worked together, following customs that prevented misunderstandings. But among all the rules and regulations, one rule stood above the rest. Don't wake the human child. Nobody questioned it. Nobody dared to break it. The rule had been repeated so often that it became a part of daily life, like breathing. Sam, the small human child, was the only one of his kind on the ship. He was barely 3 years old, with messy brown hair and a face that could switch from joy to tears in seconds. His guardian, Captain Ross, was a hardened space explorer respected by all. Every night, before leaving Sam's sleeping quarters, Ross would give a stern warning to the crew. If Sam is asleep, you leave him asleep, no matter what. For the aliens on board, this rule seemed strange. The Vaulter, a reptilian species with emerald green scales, believed it had something to do with human fragility. The Kizik, an insectoid species with 6 legs and compound eyes, thought it was a human ritual. The furry Luruk, who resembled large walking bears, simply accepted it without question. But nobody truly understood why. The question. One day, during the ship's rest cycle, 2 crew members found themselves discussing the rule in hushed voices near the control deck. "I don't understand," Vaulter whispered, his forked tongue flicking out. "Why is waking a human child so dangerous?" Kizik's antennae twitched. Perhaps humans become aggressive when disturbed from sleep. Vaulter crossed his arms. Ross is aggressive when awake, and she is an adult. Maybe the child is worse. Kizik shuddered. But the child is so small. It is hard to imagine him being dangerous. Vaulter looked around. The hall was empty. The ship was quiet, with most of the crew resting. "Maybe it is just a human superstition," he suggested. "A pointless rule." Kizik hesitated. "You want to test it?" Vaulter smirked. "Not exactly. But wouldn't you like to know the truth?" Kizik did not answer. An unfortunate incident. That same night, while the ship drifted through the vastness of space, a small alarm beeped on the control panel. It was a minor problem. A maintenance alert about air circulation on the lower deck. Normally, this would not be a cause for concern, but because most of the crew was asleep, the responsibility fell on Vaulter and Kizik. "This is simple," Vaulter muttered, tapping the controls. "We just need to check the vent system and restart it." Kizik chirped in agreement. "Let's hurry before Ross wakes up." The 2 made their way through the quiet corridors, past dimly lit panels and softly humming machinery. The ship's design was smooth and elegant, built for comfort and diplomacy rather than battle. Everything was peaceful, until they made a mistake. The vent they needed to access was located near the living quarters. In the darkness, Vaulter miscalculated the door numbers. Instead of opening the maintenance panel, he pressed the access button for Sam's room. The door slid open with a soft hiss. A small figure lay curled in a blanket, breathing steadily. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the worst happened. Sam stirred. His tiny fingers twitched. His breathing changed. His eyelids fluttered open. He was awake. A silent panic. Kizik froze. "Oh no." Vaulter's scales darkened in fear. "We have to put him back to sleep." Sam blinked at them, confused. His big round eyes reflected the dim light of the room. His small mouth opened slightly, as if he was about to say something. "Sha," Kizik whispered desperately. "Go back to sleep, small human." Sam did not understand. Instead, he yawned. Then, the most terrifying thing happened. His lower lip trembled. "No, no, no, no," Vaulter whispered. Sam's tiny face scrunched up. His breath hitched. His eyes welled up. And then he cried. A sound that shook the ship. It was not just noise. It was a force. The moment the cry left Sam's mouth, the entire ship shuddered. The lights flickered. Control panels across the ship sparked. The air itself seemed to vibrate with an invisible energy. Kizik's legs trembled. What is happening? Walter tried to move, but it felt as if gravity itself had become unstable. The ship groaned, metal bending and creaking. Down in the engine room, warning signals flashed. The ship's core surged with uncontrolled power. And in the captain's quarters, Ross's eyes snapped open. "Oh no," she muttered, leaping from her bed. They woke him. The captain arrives. Ross sprinted through the hallways, dodging sparks from overloading circuits. As she neared Sam's room, the air was heavy, charged with an invisible force. She forced the door open and took in the scene. Sam wailing, Walter frozen in terror, Kizik pressed against the wall, eyes wide with fear. She rushed to Sam, picking him up, holding him close. "Shao, buddy. It's okay. You're safe." Slowly, Sam's cries quieted. The shaking stopped. The ship's systems returned to normal. Walter and Kizik gasped for breath. Ross turned to them, her expression unreadable. "You woke him." Neither of them dared to speak. Ross sighed, rubbing Sam's back gently as his breathing slowed. She looked at the two aliens with a mixture of frustration and amusement. "I told you," she said, "never wake the human child." The rule had been broken. And now, the real explanation would have to begin. Ross stood in the middle of the dimly lit room, holding the now sleeping Sam against her chest. The child's tiny fingers clutched the fabric of her uniform, his breathing soft and steady once more. The crisis had passed, but the damage was done. Across from her, Walter and Kizik stood frozen, their expressions a mix of fear and regret. The reptilian scales had turned a dull gray, a sign of stress among his species, while Kizik's antennae twitched erratically. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Ross spoke. "You two," she said in a low voice, careful not to wake Sam again, "are in so much trouble." Neither of them dared to respond. Ross took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Yelling wouldn't help. Sam was back asleep, and she needed to keep it that way. Slowly, she walked to his small bed, gently laying him down and tucking the blanket around him. She waited until he sighed in contentment before turning back to the two aliens. "Come with me," she whispered. Walter and Kizik exchanged nervous glances, but obeyed without hesitation. A walk through the aftermath. As soon as they stepped into the hallway, the extent of the damage became clear. Panels flickered, some completely dark. The air was thick with the faint smell of burnt circuits. Distant alarms beeped weakly, as if unsure whether they should still be ringing. The ship's gravity felt slightly off, like everything was just a fraction of a step too slow. Ross muttered a curse under her breath. She tapped her communicator. "Engineering, report." A crackling voice came through. It was Jumo, the ship's chief engineer, and from the tone of her voice, she was not happy. "Captain, what the hell happened? We just had a surge that knocked out half the ship's secondary systems. The engines flickered, the shields dropped for 3 whole seconds, and I had to manually override the core before it went into shutdown. We nearly lost the ship." Ross closed her eyes for a moment. It was Sam. Silence. Then a long sigh. "They woke him, didn't they?" "Yeah. Of course they did. I'll start repairs." "But Captain." "Yeah. Make sure they never do it again." Ross cut the connection and turned to Walter and Kizik. Both stood stiff, looking like they wished they could sink into the floor. "I hope you two understand," Ross said, crossing her arms, "that this was not just some superstition." Kizik's mandibles clicked nervously. We did not know." Ross narrowed her eyes. "And yet, I told you." Repeatedly. Walter swallowed. "We thought it was a simple human custom. We did not think it would be dangerous." Ross sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Come on. Time for a lesson in human children." Explaining the impossible, Ross led them to the ship's main meeting room, where a large holographic table sat in the center. She tapped a few buttons, and a projection of the human brain appeared. "Human children," Ross began, "are not like adult humans. Their minds are still growing, still changing. Their emotions are wild. She pointed at the glowing sections of the hologram. Scientists have studied this for years. We've discovered that some human children have a strange ability, something we don't fully understand. When they feel extreme emotions, their minds reach out. Kizik tilted his head. Reach out. To what? Ross exhaled. To everything. She tapped another button, and the image changed to show a starship's energy grid. Somehow, their emotions interact with energy fields. The stronger the emotion, the stronger the effect. You saw it yourselves. When Sam cried, the ship felt it. Systems overloaded, gravity destabilized, and the power surge nearly knocked us out of space. Walter's eyes widened. So, human children are dangerous. Ross frowned. No, they aren't dangerous. They're just powerful, and they don't know how to control it. It's not their fault. Kizik's antennae twitched. Then how do you control it? Ross let out a dry laugh. You don't. You keep them happy, you keep them safe. And most importantly, she gave them both a pointed look. You let them sleep. Walter and Kizik both nodded vigorously. A new understanding. Ross leaned against the table, exhaustion creeping into her expression. I get it. You two were curious. Curiosity isn't a bad thing. But when a human gives you a rule, especially about another human, you listen. Kizik's wings fluttered in embarrassment. We understand now. Walter dipped his head. We will never wake the human child again. Ross smirked. Good, because if you do, I'm making you both take care of him until he falls back asleep. Both aliens stiffened in absolute terror. Ross laughed. That's what I thought. She turned off the hologram and stretched. All right, I need to check in with engineering. You two, go help wherever you can. And next time you have a question about humans, we ask, Walter said quickly. We never test, Kizik added. Good. Now get out of here. The two scrambled out of the room as fast as their legs could carry them. A quiet moment. Ross took a deep breath before making her way back to Sam's room. She peeked inside. The small boy was still fast asleep, snuggled under his blanket. His breathing was slow and even. Ross allowed herself a small smile. She had seen many terrifying things in her time as a captain. War, hostile aliens, space itself trying to kill them. But nothing was as powerful as a crying, scared human child. She placed a gentle hand on Sam's head, brushing back his soft hair. Sleep tight, kiddo, she murmured. The ship's safe. And now, I think they finally understand why. She stepped out, letting the door slide shut behind her. This time, she knew for certain, nobody would ever break that rule again. The ship Unity's promise drifted silently through deep space. The emergency had passed, but the damage remained. Across the ship, engineers worked to repair the systems that had been overloaded by the earlier surge. The lights still flickered in some hallways, and the gravity was not quite stable yet. The entire crew had felt the disturbance, even those who had been asleep at the time. And all of it had been caused by one small human child. Sam. In the dim glow of the ship's night cycle, the boy slept peacefully in his quarters, his tiny hands curled under his cheek. His soft breathing was the only sound in the room. His guardian, Captain Ross, had already checked on him twice. She knew better than anyone. This peace was fragile, because if Sam woke up in distress again, the entire ship could be thrown into another crisis. Ross sighed, running a hand through her short, dark hair as she left his room and stepped into the hallway. The moment she did, she found two very nervous aliens standing just outside. Walter and Kizik, the ones responsible for waking Sam in the first place. Ross crossed her arms. You two still here? Kizik's wings twitched. We wanted to make sure the child remains asleep. Walter nodded quickly. Yes, we are guarding the door. No one will enter. Ross raised an eyebrow. I don't think anyone wants to enter after what happened. The reptilian and insectoid glanced at each other, clearly embarrassed. Ross sighed and leaned against the wall. She could see the guilt in their body language. They had learned their lesson, but curiosity still lingered in their eyes. "All right," Ross said. "Ask your questions." Kizik tilted his head. "Questions? You still don't understand everything, do you?" Ross smirked. "Go on. Ask." Walter hesitated. "How exactly did the child do that?" Ross exhaled. "We don't fully understand it ourselves. But human children, some of them, at least, have a connection to energy fields. They don't control it consciously. It's just a reaction. When they're extremely emotional, their mind reaches out, and their feelings affect the world around them." Kizik's antennae twitched. But how can a mind change the ship's systems? That's the big question. Ross shook her head. "There are theories. Some scientists think human brains generate a unique type of energy. Others believe it's a form of subconscious telekinesis. Whatever it is, one thing is clear. It's powerful and unpredictable." Walter swallowed. So, if he had been more upset, Ross's face darkened. Then the damage would have been far worse. A heavy silence followed her words. A sudden problem. Before anyone could speak again, the ship lurched. The floor trembled beneath them. A loud mechanical groan echoed through the corridors. Ross's communicator crackled. "Captain, we've got another power surge." Ross's heart dropped. She turned to the others. "Stay here." Then she sprinted toward the control room. The moment she entered, she saw chaos. The screens flickered wildly, and warning lights flashed across the main console. Juno, the chief engineer, was furiously typing commands, trying to stabilize the systems. "What happened?" Ross demanded. Juno grimaced. "The energy field spike is happening again. But the kid's asleep, isn't he?" Ross's blood ran cold. "Yes." Then what was causing this? Suddenly, a new alert appeared on the screen. Ross's eyes widened. "Sam's brain activity is spiking." The dream. Inside his small bed, Sam twitched in his sleep. His tiny fingers clenched the blanket. His breathing quickened. He was dreaming. And the ship felt it. The lights dimmed, then flashed. The gravity flickered, causing objects to rise an inch before slamming back down. Energy pulsed through the ship like an invisible storm. Ross grabbed the console. "If this keeps up, we're going to lose control." Juno's eyes were filled with panic. "We have to wake him up before it gets worse." Ross froze. "Wake him up." The last time he was woken suddenly, he cried, and nearly destroyed half the ship. But this time, he was causing damage while asleep. Ross took a shaky breath. There was only one option. She had to wake him up, but gently. The captain's gamble. Ross sprinted back to Sam's room. Walter and Kizik stepped aside instantly, their eyes filled with worry. Inside, the small boy whimpered in his sleep, his face scrunched in distress. Ross moved carefully, kneeling beside his bed. Her voice was soft, calm. "Sam," she whispered. "Hey, buddy. It's okay. I'm here." His breathing hitched. Ross gently placed a hand on his back, rubbing slow circles. "You're safe. Just wake up slowly, okay?" For a long moment, nothing happened. The ship shook again. Ross held her breath. Then, Sam's eyes fluttered open. The shaking stopped instantly. The lights stabilized. The energy surge vanished. The ship exhaled. A quiet aftermath. Sam blinked sleepily. "Cap'n Ross." Ross smiled, relieved. "Yeah, kiddo. I'm here." Sam yawned and reached out his arms. Without hesitation, Ross picked him up. He rested his head on her shoulder, already drifting back to sleep. Behind her, Walter and Kizik watched in stunned silence. Ross looked at them and sighed. "Looks like we have a new problem." Kizik tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Ross rubbed Sam's back gently. I thought we only had to worry about waking him up." She looked down at the peaceful child in her arms. "But now we know his dreams are just as dangerous." Walter's scales paled. Kizik's antennae trembled. Ross smirked tiredly. "Welcome to babysitting a human child. It only gets weirder from here." Sam slept peacefully in Ross's arms, his small body warm against her uniform. The ship was calm again. The flickering lights had steadied, and the energy surges were gone. But Ross knew the problem was far from over. Walter and Kizik stood frozen in the hallway, still trying to process what they had just seen. Finally, Kizik found his voice. "The human child. He did all of that, while asleep." Ross sighed. "Yeah." Walter's tail flicked nervously. "So it is not just crying that is dangerous. His dreams can affect the ship too." Ross nodded. "Looks like it." Silence. Then Kizik asked the obvious question. "What do we do now?" Ross exhaled, adjusting Sam slightly in her arms. "First, we need to figure out why this is happening. Sam has been on this ship for months, and his dreams never caused a problem before." Walter's eyes narrowed. "Then something has changed." Ross gave a grim nod. "Yeah. And we need to find out what." The investigation begins. Ross carried Sam to the ship's medical bay. Walter and Kizik followed closely behind, still uneasy. Dr. Lin, the ship's head medic, was already waiting. She was a short, no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a permanent expression of exhaustion, mostly because she was one of the few humans on board, and dealing with alien biology every single day was not easy. Lin took one look at Ross and crossed her arms. "What happened this time?" Ross sighed. Sam was dreaming. The ship reacted. Lin blinked. He was asleep, and it still caused a surge. Ross nodded. Lin muttered something under her breath before motioning toward a diagnostic bed. "Lay him down. Let's scan him." Ross carefully placed Sam onto the soft medical table. The child stirred slightly but did not wake. Lin activated the scanner, and a soft blue light passed over his body. For a moment, nothing happened. Then strange data began appearing on the screen. Lin frowned. "That's weird." Ross leaned in. "What is?" Lin tapped the screen. "Sam's brain activity is off the charts. I've seen high levels before, but this..." She shook her head. "It's like his mind is reaching out to something." Walter's tail flicked. "Reaching out? To what?" Lin exhaled. "I don't know, but something is triggering this. A new theory." Ross crossed her arms. "We need to consider all possibilities. Has Sam eaten anything different?" Lin shook her head. "No. His diet has been consistent." Kizik's wings twitched. "Has he been exposed to any unusual radiation?" Lin frowned, checking the data. "Nope. He's completely clean." Walter hesitated. "Then, what about his surroundings?" Ross frowned. "His room." Walter nodded. "Maybe something in his sleeping area is causing his mind to react." It was a long shot, but at this point, they had no better leads. Ross exhaled. "All right, let's check his room." The search. Back in Sam's small quarters, everything looked normal. The bed was neatly made, well, as neatly as a 3-year-old could manage. His stuffed toys were scattered across the blankets. A small nightlight glowed softly in the corner. Ross scanned the room, hands on her hips. "If something is causing this, it has to be here." Kizik's antennae twitched. "We should scan for unknown energy signatures." Walter pulled out a small handheld scanner and started waving it over different objects. The screen beeped softly as it read the energy levels of each item. Stuffed bear. Normal. Blankets. Normal. Nightlight. Normal. Then, BEP, BEP, VEEK. Ross turned quickly. "What is it?" Walter's eyes widened. He pointed at a small, round object near Sam's pillow. "This." Ross picked it up. It was a simple metal disc about the size of her palm. A small light pulsed at its center. It looked like a harmless toy, but the scanner was still beeping wildly. Ross's expression darkened. That's not a toy. Kizik stepped closer. What is it? Ross gritted her teeth. It's a memory enhancer. Walter frowned. A what? Ross explained. Some species use these for learning. They help the brain retain information. But on a child? She shook her head. It could be amplifying his brain activity, making his dreams stronger. Kizik's wings twitched. Who gave it to him? Ross's jaw clenched. That's what we're going to find out. Finding the culprit, Ross marched toward the security room, the small device in her hand. If someone had given Sam an unauthorized object, she was going to find out who. Inside the security room, she accessed the logs. The cameras showed everyone who had entered Sam's quarters in the past few days. Most of it was routine. Ross herself, a few caretakers, and Ross froze. A new figure appeared on the screen. A Lurok engineer named Talo. Ross narrowed her eyes. Talo. Walter frowned. Why would he give Sam a memory enhancer? Ross didn't answer. She was already on her way to find out. The confrontation. Talo was in the engine room, working on stabilizing the ship's power core. He was a large, bear-like alien with thick brown fur and wide golden eyes. When he saw Ross approaching, he straightened. Captain, he greeted. Something wrong. Ross held up the device. You gave this to Sam. Talo's fur bristled. Yes, I did. But why? Ross demanded. Talo hesitated, then sighed. I did not mean harm. The child struggles with memory. I thought this would help him learn better. Ross's hands tightened into fists. You didn't ask permission. Talo looked guilty. I thought it was harmless. Ross took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. You have no idea what you've done. This thing is amplifying his dreams, his emotions. He nearly shut down the entire ship. Talo's eyes widened in horror. I did not realize. Ross cut him off. I should throw you in the brig for this. Talo lowered his head. I accept punishment. Ross exhaled sharply. Just get out of my sight. We'll deal with this later. Talo left without another word. Ross turned to Walter and Kizik. We need to disable this thing immediately. A temporary solution. Back in the medical bay, Dr. Lin carefully shut down the device. The scanner beeped one final time before the energy signature faded. Ross sighed in relief. That should stop the problem. For now. She looked down at Sam, still sleeping soundly. His face was peaceful again. Kizik's voice was quiet. What if he has another dream? Ross smirked tiredly. Then I guess we really have to make sure he doesn't have any more bad ones. Walter shivered. I will never wake a human child again. Ross chuckled. Smart choice. Sam shifted slightly, cuddling into the blanket. The ship remained silent. For now, at least, the danger had passed. The ship Unity's Promise floated quietly through space. For the first time in hours, everything was calm. No energy surges, no flickering lights, no strange gravitational shifts. But Captain Ross knew better than to relax. The memory-enhancing device had been shut down, and Sam had been sleeping peacefully ever since. Yet something still bothered her. Talo, the Lurok engineer, had claimed he gave the device to Sam to help him learn. Ross didn't buy it. Talo was an experienced engineer. He knew the risks of using advanced neural tech on humans, especially a child. There had to be another reason he did it. Ross intended to find out. A new clue. Ross walked into the security room, where Walter and Kizik were already reviewing footage. The holographic screen showed different angles from the ship's corridors. Find anything? Ross asked. Walter frowned. Something unusual. He played a video clip. The footage showed Talo sneaking into Sam's room when no one was around. He placed the memory device under the boy's pillow, then quickly left. Ross narrowed her eyes. He was in a hurry. Kizik's wings twitched, almost as if he did not want to be caught. Ross leaned closer. Check his movements before this. Where did he get the device? Walter rewound the footage. The screen now showed Tallow entering the cargo bay. He stopped in front of a sealed container, one that belonged to the science division. Ross's stomach tightened. Pause. Zoom in on that crate. Walter did. A series of markings ran along the side of the container. Ross recognized the symbol immediately. It belonged to the Xenobiology Research Department. Ross clenched her fists. So this wasn't Tallow's idea. Someone from science gave him that device. Kizik's antennae twitched. But why? Ross turned toward the door. There's only one way to find out. Interrogating the scientists. Ross stormed into the science lab. The room was filled with holographic displays, strange biological samples, and blinking equipment. Dr. Relic, the head scientist, a tall, pale-skinned Silari with 4 arms, looked up in surprise. Captain, is there a problem? Ross didn't waste time. She held up the memory device. Where did this come from? Relic's 4 eyes blinked. That is, a learning enhancer. I know what it is, Ross snapped. I want to know why one of your devices was given to a child. Relic hesitated. Ross stepped forward. Don't play games with me, Doctor. Tallow got this from one of your crates. Who authorized it? Relic sighed. Fine. I will tell you the truth. He folded 2 of his arms and motioned toward a nearby console. We have been studying human neural activity. It is quite unique. Ross crossed her arms. I know that already. Relic continued. But there is something different about Sam. Ross frowned. Different how? Relic pulled up a screen. We ran routine scans on all humans aboard this ship. Sam's readings stood out. His brain waves are more synchronized with energy fields than any human we have ever encountered. Ross's heart skipped a beat. You're saying he's special? Relic nodded. Yes, his connection to energy is far stronger than normal. We wanted to see if the enhancer would amplify it further. Ross's blood boiled. You experimented on a child. Without permission. Relic's expression remained calm. We did not harm him. We only wished to observe. Ross's fists tightened. Your observation nearly destroyed this ship. For the first time, Relic looked uneasy. We did not expect such a strong reaction. Ross took a deep breath. She wanted to punch this scientist. Instead, she forced herself to focus. So what's the conclusion? What makes Sam so different? Relic hesitated. Then he brought up another scan. His neural field does not just react to energy. He looked at Ross. It creates it. Ross froze. What? Relic pointed at the screen. His mind is not just absorbing power from the ship's systems. It is generating an energy field of its own, a powerful one. Ross felt a chill run down her spine. You're telling me Sam is producing his own energy surges? Relic nodded. Yes, and they are growing stronger. A dangerous truth. Ross turned away, gripping the edge of a console. Her thoughts raced. Sam was just a child. A normal, playful, messy kid. He loved stuffed animals and bedtime stories. He liked cookies and hugs. But now she was being told that his mind had the power to reshape reality. It was too much. Walter spoke up. What does this mean for him? Relic hesitated. If his energy field continues to grow, he could become dangerous. Not intentionally, of course, but his emotions control this power. Ross's stomach tightened, and children are emotional. Kizik's wings fluttered nervously. If he has a nightmare or feels scared. Ross finished the thought. It could trigger another surge. A heavy silence filled the room. Ross turned back to Relic, her voice cold. I want all of your research on Sam. Every scan, every test. Relic nodded slowly. Understood. Ross glared at him. And if you ever experiment on him again without my permission, I will personally throw you out the nearest airlock. Rillick swallowed. Noted. A hard choice. Ross left the lab with Walter and Kizik. The information swirled in her mind like a storm. Sam wasn't just reacting to energy. He was producing it. That meant he wasn't just dangerous to the ship. He was dangerous to himself. Ross looked down at the small device in her hand. If Sam's power kept growing, what would happen? Would he lose control? Would he become a danger to everyone around him? Ross clenched her jaw. No. She refused to let that happen. She would protect Sam, no matter what. Back to the child. When Ross entered Sam's quarters, he was awake. The small boy sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes. Cap'n Ross, he murmured sleepily. Ross forced a smile. Hey, buddy, you feeling okay? Sam yawned and nodded. Had a good dream. Ross sat beside him. Yeah, what about? Sam smiled. I was flying. Like a big spaceship. Ross swallowed. Flying. Energy. Power. She ruffled his hair. That sounds amazing, kiddo. Sam giggled and snuggled into his blanket. Ross exhaled. She didn't know what the future held. But one thing was clear. Sam wasn't just any human child. And soon, the entire galaxy might find out. Ross had always known space was full of dangers. Exploding stars, hostile aliens, and the cold vacuum waiting to claim anyone who made a mistake. But now, the biggest danger on the Unity's promise wasn't outside the ship. It was a 3-year-old human child. Sam, the boy who could change reality just by dreaming. Ross sat in the command room, staring at the research files that Dr. Rillick had given her. The words on the screen were clear, but she still struggled to believe them. Sam is generating an independent energy field. It is growing stronger. If it becomes unstable, the results could be catastrophic. Ross rubbed her face. How do you tell a child that his own mind is a weapon? Walter and Kizik sat across from her, just as troubled. Walter finally broke the silence. We need a plan. Ross nodded. Yeah, but first, we need to know how much control he actually has. Kizik's wings twitched. You mean, we should test his power? Ross exhaled. Not a full test, just a simple one. We need to see if he can stop his energy from reacting when he's awake. Walter hesitated. And if he can't? Ross's expression darkened. Then we have a much bigger problem. A gentle test. Ross entered Sam's quarters. The little boy sat on his bed, hugging his stuffed bear. His wide eyes lit up when he saw her. Cap'n Ross. He cheered. Ross smiled. But inside, she felt worried. She sat beside him. Hey, buddy. I need your help with something. Sam tilted his head. Help. Ross nodded. Do you remember how, sometimes, the lights flicker when you dream? Sam's little fingers gripped his bear tighter. Aha. Ross spoke gently. I want to see if you can do something special. Can you think about turning the lights off? But not actually do it. Sam blinked. Just think. Yes. Ross pointed to the ceiling lights. Try to imagine them turning off, but don't let it happen. Sam squinted at the lights. His tiny face scrunched in concentration. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the lights flickered. Ross's stomach tightened. Sam's face looked confused. I didn't mean to. Ross placed a calming hand on his shoulder. It's okay, kiddo. Try again. Just think about the lights. Don't let them move. Sam focused. The lights flickered again, but only for a second. Then they steadied. Ross's heart pounded. You did it, Sam. Sam grinned. I did. Ross nodded. You stopped it. Sam giggled. That was easy. Ross forced a smile, but inside, her mind was racing. Sam had barely controlled it. If it took this much effort when he was awake, what happened when he was asleep? They were running out of time. The warning. Ross gathered her crew in the war room. The situation was clear now. Sam's power was real, and it was growing. Dr. Lin leaned forward. We need to train him. If he doesn't learn control, his subconscious could destroy the ship. Walter looked uneasy, but he's just a child. Can a human that young even understand something like this? Ross exhaled. We don't have a choice. If we do nothing, things will only get worse. Kizik's antennae twitched. There is another danger. Everyone turned to him. Kizik spoke carefully. If we know about Sam's power, how long until someone else finds out? The room fell silent. Ross hadn't thought about that. But it was true. If the wrong people learned about Sam, governments, militaries, scientists who only saw him as an experiment, they would come for him. Ross gritted her teeth. Then we make sure no one finds out. Lynn crossed her arms. And how do you plan to do that? Ross stood up. By keeping Sam safe, no matter what. The first lesson. Later that night, Ross sat beside Sam again. The little boy yawned, rubbing his eyes sleepily. Ross tucked his blanket around him. Sam, can I tell you a secret? Sam's eyes widened. Secret. Ross nodded. You have a very special gift. But gifts like yours need practice, like learning to walk or talk. Sam frowned. Like when I learned to eat with a spoon. Ross chuckled. Exactly. Sam thought about it, then smiled. Okay, I'll practice. Ross brushed his hair back. Good boy. She had no idea how they were going to teach him. But one thing was clear. Sam wasn't just a child anymore. He was something more. And soon, the universe would find out. Ross had been through many dangerous situations in her life. Rogue asteroid fields, pirate ambushes, failed engines in the middle of deep space. But nothing scared her more than what was happening now. Sam was changing. His power wasn't just growing, it was evolving. For the past few days, the ship had experienced strange phenomena. Objects moving on their own. Gravity shifts in certain rooms. Energy surges that made lights flicker. And all of it happened when Sam was asleep. Ross had tried to guide him, to teach him control. But he was only 3 years old. He didn't understand what was happening to him. And now, it was happening again. The energy storm. Ross was in the command room when the first tremor hit. The walls shuddered. The lights dimmed. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated. Alarms blared. Walter grabbed onto the control panel. Another energy surge. Ross didn't hesitate. Where's Sam? Kizik checked the sensors. His quarters. Ross bolted from her chair. She raced down the hallway, the ship shaking around her. She reached Sam's room and slammed the door open. What she saw made her freeze. Sam was floating in the air. His tiny body glowed with blue energy. His hair stood on end, and his eyes were closed. The furniture in the room was spinning around him. His stuffed bear drifted like it was in zero gravity. Ross rushed forward and grabbed Sam's shoulders. Sam, wake up. Sam's eyes snapped open, and the moment they did, the ship lurched violently. Ross was thrown back, hitting the wall hard. Sam gasped. Captain Ross. The energy around him vanished. Everything in the room dropped back to the floor. Sam ran to her. I didn't mean to. Ross groaned, pushing herself up. It's okay, kiddo. She touched his cheek. I know you didn't. Sam's lower lip trembled. I had a bad dream. Ross pulled him into a hug. I know, buddy. I know. But inside, her mind was racing. His power was getting stronger. Too strong. And soon, someone else would notice. They know. Ross sat in the war room with Walter, Kizik, and Dr. Lin. The atmosphere was tense. Lin folded her arms. We can't hide this anymore. The energy spikes are too big. If anyone scans our ship, they'll see them. Ross exhaled. I know. Walter looked serious. And if someone finds out about Sam? Kizik's wings twitched. They will come for him. Ross clenched her jaw. She wouldn't let that happen. Lynn spoke carefully. Captain, we have two choices. We either find a way to contain his power, or we leave him somewhere safe. Ross's eyes flashed. Are you suggesting we abandon him? Lynn hesitated. Not abandon. Just protect him. If he's on a quiet planet, far from technology, no one will detect him. Ross shook her head. No, we're his family. We don't leave family behind. Walter looked at the captain. Then what's the plan? Ross sighed. We find a way to help him. Fast. A friend appears. A few hours later, an alert flashed on Ross's console. Incoming transmission. Ross frowned. Who the hell? She opened the message. A holographic figure appeared. A tall, hooded alien with glowing golden eyes. Their voice was deep and calm. I know what you carry aboard your ship, they said. Ross's blood ran cold. Who are you? The figure spoke slowly. I am called Valen, and I have been searching for one like him. Ross's fists clenched. He's just a child. Valen nodded. Yes, but he is also more. And if you do not guide him properly, others will come. Others who do not wish to protect him. Ross narrowed her eyes. What do you want? Valen's golden eyes seemed to glow brighter. To help. A choice to make. Valen was a mystery. No records of him existed. No known species matched his features. Yet he knew about Sam. Ross didn't trust him. But she also knew that they were running out of options. She gathered her crew. Valen says he can help Sam. I don't know if we can trust him. But if we do nothing, it's only a matter of time before someone else finds us. Walter crossed his arms. What does Sam think? Ross turned to the little boy sitting beside her. Sam looked up at her with wide eyes. He feels quiet. Ross frowned. Quiet. Sam nodded. Like the stars are quiet around him. Ross exchanged glances with her crew. Sam sensed things in ways they couldn't understand. If he wasn't afraid of Valen, maybe they shouldn't be either. Ross exhaled. All right. We meet him. The beginning of something new. The Unity's promise arrived at a quiet, uncharted moon. Valen was waiting for them on the surface. Ross, Sam, and the crew stepped onto the soft, silver sand. The sky above them was filled with swirling blue lights, almost like the northern lights on Earth. Valen approached. His golden eyes focused on Sam. You are young, he said gently. Sam blinked up at him. You talk weird. Valen chuckled. Perhaps, but I understand you. Ross stepped forward. Can you really help him? Valen nodded. Yes, but it will not be easy. He is powerful. If he does not learn control, he will become a danger, not just to others, but to himself. Ross's heart tightened. Then help him. Valen looked down at Sam. Are you ready, little one? Sam hesitated, then nodded. I want to learn. Valen smiled. Then let us begin. Ross watched as Valen placed a gentle hand on Sam's forehead. A soft glow surrounded them. Sam gasped. It feels warm. Ross didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, she felt hope. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The universe would soon know Sam's name. And nothing would ever be the same again.